in UK and US, 36% of the population has a bachelor's degree, whereas the Indian diaspora within UK and US, it's 81%. So these founders are significantly more educated. Your Google CEO, Microsoft CEO, YouTube, Perplexity, Loom, Zscaler, Adobe, Micron, FedEx, Procter & Gamble. I can go on for days. All of these guys are Indian. Even though we only represent 2.1% of the population, we've resulted in 19% of all unicorns.
Today, he is one of the youngest fund managers running a portfolio of companies of 80 plus startups across 5 funds, 16 countries, and doing over 300 million in ARR. Most people spend their 20s figuring out what to build. Anmol Goel spent his building his fund. He exited his first company at the age of 20 years, beta tested OpenAI and Gemini long before anybody had heard of them, started his journey at JP Morgan and KPMG, and then left them to back founders instead of managing assets. So welcome back to Build with Shreya, where ideas and stories inspire you to build something extraordinary. Anmol Goel is the founder of GACS Ventures, and GACS, a multi-family office co-investing with 30 plus other family offices across US, UK, and India. In this conversation, we will understand how to separate a real technology solution from a commercially hollow product, what kills a fundraise even before it starts, what is the difference between technology working versus a business working, and where is the next wave of real technology being built. And so if you are somebody who is building something innovative, who wants to fundraise, or if you want to understand how is the smartest early stage capital thinking right now, this one is for you. So make sure to like, subscribe, and comment on our channel, and let's welcome Anmol to Build with Shreya. Hi Anmol, welcome to Build with Shreya, and we're super happy to have you on a podcast today.
Thank you very much for having me. It's a real pleasure to be here.
So Anmol, I'm really curious about your journey and the origins of where you started building your fund. You exited your first company at the age of 20 and you beta tested OpenAI, Gemini, even before its public release. And now you're building $100 million fund, and over the top of it, you're aiming for a $10 billion AUM fund. So tell us about that journey and what problem were you trying to solve at the point when you started it? And why did you think that capital was the right tool to do it?
See, when I began the first company, right, I was 17, the thought process wasn't that I was trying to solve a problem. Macro-wise, the only thing that I was trying to do was make money. Mm-hmm. So I came from a very humble background. I was born here in Delhi. I moved when I was 9.5 years old. And I came from a very humble family. So growing up in a 1 BHK flat, 5 people, my thing was always, if I could make a little bit of money from mum and dad, it would go a long way. And even when we moved to the UK, I saw, dad working multiple shifts and mum staying up at night and catering and her working very hard as well. So always the thing was, if I could do a little bit more, it's a typical middle class mentality. So by the time I turned 17, I'd already done multiple jobs. I mowed the lawn. I did newspaper rounds. I was tutoring. I, worked for charities. You can name it. And at that point, at 16, I also started to teach myself how to trade, as well as how to code. So I started a trading account at 17 under my mum's name, because it was illegal to have an account under 18. And I remember the exact amount. I had £765 saved up over the last few years of working, and I put that in an account to make money, and then that's where the journey started. So I think what I was trying to solve, if I really say, was the problem of that desire to be someone or something. Mm-hmm. And it just sort of took fire. So that company, I wasn't able to exit it. I made about 50,000 and then had to shut it down. Then I went to university. I built my second company, which again stemmed from the fact that I wanted to sell properties, because 75% of billionaires are made from real estate. Mm-hmm. I wasn't able to sell much real estate, but I built a platform which someone had wanted, and that was my first near 6-figure exit at the age of 20. And then it sort of became addicting, right? When you have that itch for entrepreneurship, it keeps coming back to you. You can't really go back to corporate. So even though I did do stints at JP Morgan and Marsh McLennan, there was always that little part of me. I was like, what's happening over there, or what's happening over here? Let me try build something. Yeah. And one of the things that also happened when I exited JP Morgan after my internship and my short stint there, that was the year 2021. So as we know, good old COVID, I didn't get a chance to go into the office much. So the 3 months that I was there, I visited the office once. And then even when I started at Marsh McLennan in 22, it was 2 days a week. And then the second wave of COVID came in 2022. So again, the exposure, to what the generation before might be watching, what the exposure they had was very different. We're that generation who watched Wolf of Wall Street going up, and, that was our mentality, thinking this is how financial world would be. It was completely different. And at that time, Harvard had launched a course in innovation and entrepreneurship. And I just wanted to enroll into that, partly because I wanted to learn. And then, as an Asian kid, having Harvard on your CV speaks volumes. And then, it was coincidental that I ran into OpenAI in June 2022 and, was able to, they didn't pay me, right? So beta testing was pretty much like, hey, we're doing this. And I was like, I have a quench or thirst of knowledge that I wanted to try something cool out, and then really liked iterating and giving user feedback, testing stuff out, and then same with Bard. And I realized, okay, well, I have a strong understanding of this, and this could really shape our future, which now it clearly has. And then I started to invest. I remember writing my first check at 22, which was a $6,000 check. Then other people started coming up to me and asking me, hey, can I give you $20,000, $30,000? Can you invest in a tech company? What's happening? Started posting a lot on LinkedIn. I think I got, in the first 7 or 8 months, 9,000 followers on LinkedIn. Which are now nothing, but, back then getting, 100, few 100,000 impressions on the post. And things just rolled up from there. So now, obviously, the thinking and what I want to do with this $100 million fund and the $10 million AUM of the family office is completely different. But that stemmed from that. And it was a natural progression of growing things day by day, starting from hunger to part discovery, to then building out, a infrastructure, to now a thought process of having a complete ecosystem, which is so rigid and so strong that you are massively de-risked in your investment. So that's how things are.
No, that's amazing, because I think early on, if you talk about any business or entrepreneurship, capital stays at the core of it. And your first experience taught you that how to work with capital. And then you went on to build a product that gave you sort of, okay, this is how things are built. And then you were exposed to new age technology. You were like, okay, this is where the future lies.
Yeah.
So basics of the foundations of the business, core of the product, and a vision of the future of where tech is going. And with that perspective, you have invested in 80 plus startups over 16 countries. How do you genuinely disintegrate or identify which startup is genuinely solving a real problem versus just a pitch deck?
Yeah. No, massively. Especially in a day and age today where pitch decks can be so beautifully creative, you have to be very careful.
You need to go to presentation.ai. It's as simple as that.
Great plugin. But I think, there's a prerequisite of you must know the numbers, you must know your market, you must know blah, blah. After that, understanding if the company is solving a real problem is sticking to a niche which you understand about. So there's certain stuff that I would love to say I understand, but I don't. Stuff which is super hardware, like space, like defense, like, high-end manufacturing, steel, these kind of stuff I don't understand. So for me to understand where the problem lies, I need to be able to understand myself what the founder is building. Where a lot of investors go wrong is they FOMO into these areas thinking something looks cool and this beautiful deck and whatever. And then they lose a track of self-identification or relation to what the founder is building. So I stick to something I can understand, which is typically around that tech circle. There's obviously agnosticity in that as well within fintech and medtech. So I always try and bring a subject matter expert with me. But I think outside of that, more than just the problem-solving aspect, I try to look at what the founder herself or himself are doing. We have this saying now that we go by is we back the jockey, not the horse, right? In a world where tech itself is no longer the moat, right? Yeah. Everyone has the same accessibility, the same tools like Claude and Kimi and OpenAI and Perplexity. right? So they can utilize the same thing to build out an MVP.
It's just a means to an end.
It's just a means to an end, right? So how do you then make that judgment? So it's no longer the idea, and the thing is, the idea will also evolve over time. So what is the bigger picture of what they're trying to create? Do I, one, understand it? Second, do I relate to it, resonate to it? And third, what is the hunger, the defensibility, the background, and the desire of the founder? If the founder has that hunger, that trait, they've exited the company before, it gives me that confidence to bet on them, right? And another thing, going back on the founder and both the product itself, is they need to have flexibility and be light on their feet. And to give you a very well-known example for that is YouTube, right? When YouTube started back in the day, in 2006 or 5, whatever the year was, I don't know if you know, it didn't start as a streaming platform. It started as a dating website. So what you were meant to do is post a video, someone would like it, they would then reach out to you and blah. So that was the initial concept of YouTube. But they realized after a few people had posted, people were reaching out, like, where's this guy going? What's happening? And it turned into more of a social media broadcasting live channel, and they pivoted. So a trait of a good founder with a good open product is they're able to do that. So these are sort of the things that I've now started to realize. And then the last defining factor about myself is I look at capital actually being the last thing to focus on. So let's say, you're building something and I've agreed to invest $1 million into you. Let's say today I'm meant to be wiring the money. I'll do this test, hypothetically, not exact way, that if today I'm meant to be wiring you the money and I can no longer wire you the money, do you still want me on your cap table due to my intelligence, my distribution, my network, my co-invest, my exposure, and the breadth of abilities I can bring to the table, right? And the core capabilities outside of capital? And if the answer to that is yes, then I'll come in. If the answer is no, then there's no point of me coming in, right? Because I'm not writing the 20, 30, $40 million checks, right? I don't have that capacity. Typically, these check sizes are between, 100K, 200, 300, up to sort of 600, 700. I've done a couple of million ones as well. So in that space, I need to know that I can be very, very hands-on with these founders and help them scale outside of what capital might not be able to do, or more so will take time to do. So that's how I make these bets.
So what I see here is sort of finding that mutual fit.
Massively.
And prioritizing that it's not just one way where you're trying to sort of look for a company that's a good investment, but also seeing, can you really bring growth to the company in the best sense? And a lot of investors, they would just write checks, attend the board meetings, but you integrate tech teams, sales engine from the day one. Yeah. And so your portfolio gets from pre-seed to seed in 8 months, where the industry average is 2.2 years. So what does that look operationally? And, what do you do first?
So, well, the very first thing is looking at these companies in terms of what tech and commercialization they need. If you look at pre-seed companies, software companies more so, I'm not talking about hardware, the two biggest killer, if we take human reasons out, is tech, right? The tech costs get too high or too complicated, or they're not able to commercialize, right? Which is a lack of sales, go-to-market structuring. So these are always the two problems we try to address straight away. So we built out the venture studio exactly on that model, where we do what's called tech for equity investment, right? Where the venture studio acts as an investor in exchange for these equities, in exchange for these services. We will take equity in the company and help these companies scale, right, to a certain point where they can then get their tech guys on board. If they want to take our tech guys, they can as well. So we've got a very simple model where, if you want to in-house the devs, you can, right? We don't keep the devs. You can keep the devs if you want. And then in terms of commercial, is sort of what I was saying before. I can only be commercially viable if I understand the product and I understand the market, right? If you were to come to me with a, rocket, I don't know who to take it to, right? Yeah. Whereas if you come to me for fintech, I was a fintech founder myself, right? I have great governance understanding. I have great co-invest understanding. I have great relationships with bank. I have great relationships with fintech PE firms. So I can take you to every doorstep and say, okay, what is needed here? What is needed here? What is needed here? And work my way backwards. And we often do that in the due diligence phase, not after investing, during investment, right? And if the answers for everyone looks positive, then I know as soon as the money's gone in, these companies will scale. And oftentimes we will actually make these introductions during the due diligence phase where the companies already start to reap the benefits, even if we haven't come on board, right? Because then the founders are like, okay, this guy's genuinely helping. And often what happens is then we get preferential treatment, right? We get, discounts on the valuation and that kind of stuff because you've really, truly built that relationship out. I mean, with one of the founders we did that with, they're in the health tech space, another one in data tech space. With those guys, I literally was in an Airbnb with them, right? We were sleeping on the sofas. It was 1 a.m., strategy meetings at 1 a.m. Like the typical founder journey,
Yeah.
I'm involved with it, right? So it's not like the really big funds. I mean, they have their own place in the ecosystem, but they will never do that, right? The likes of the Axels and the Sequoias, they just don't have the desire or the need. Right. So that's where we differentiate, and that's how we like to plug in.
So I think more like fractional co-founder of sense.
Yeah.
Of sense.
Yeah.
Okay. Going back a little over beta testing with OpenAI and Gemini, how do you think that's shaped how you evaluate AI native startups? And as per you, what is the hardest thing to evaluate when it comes to AI companies nowadays?
Yeah. I think the funny thing is in the last 4 years, things have really evolved. I would have said that I had a massive advantage then, and I really truly did. But I think now I am, dependent a lot more on my engineering team. We have about 38 engineers in house, so I now look at them and I go, please tell me, this is a good sign. Because it's funny, the development in these 4 years and the leaps and bounds AI has taken it's exponential, right? It's massive, it's exponential. But in the start, I could say the advantage I had was I could figure out what was an AI wrapper, which a lot of companies still are, versus a true AI company, which was integrating either a small learning model or a large learning model into its system, and how it was integrating that, and how the machine learning algorithms at the back are running, and what they're trying to do. That's really become baseline now. But back then, I was able to then construct a due diligence report, sit with other investors and say, hey, here is the reason why one person should invest. And here's the reason why I would, right? I mean, like I said, I always put my money where my mouth is. I mean, I started investing with $6,000. It's not a huge amount, but for a 22-year-old, that's all he had, right? And they saw that, at 22, 23, when I was putting the 6Ks, 10Ks, 20Ks, which was all that I had the capacity to, they would say, well, he clearly sees conviction, and, no one's crazy enough to put money into something they don't see conviction in, right? So that was the first thing that I always led from the front, that I was like, if I'm understanding this, if I'm analyzing this, and I'm going to ask someone else to invest in it, I have to be invested in it myself. Now, obviously, with the technologies, the way things have grown, we have our own AI infrastructure as well, which does due diligence. That's the first layer of understanding the product, the market, the baseline concept of what's happening. Then there's a layer of analysts and associates, which have been picked out and trained by the staff, which used to do sort of what I used to do 4 years ago. And then it's the partners level, really sort of analyzing more the journey, right? What do the founders want to do? What belief systems do the founders have? Do we have the same concept of where we want to be in 10 years' time? What the bigger picture is, and really trying to understand the person, and then bringing in these specialist partners or ecosystem builders or players, and then finally doing so it's phased out like that now.
And when you talk about understanding the values of the founders, right, you also specifically support Indian diaspora founders across US and UK, and that's a very deliberate bet. So are there some advantages that you perceive to come from that diaspora specifically that is good for the fund?
Massively, right? So I saw this report by McKinsey and Indiaspora, which was, I think, done in 2022 or 23. And then on top of that, we did our research, which was published in a few newspapers, where over the last 15 years, if you look at the Indian diaspora base, specifically in UK and US, 3 astounding statistics massively showed up. The first one was education rates. So in UK and US, 36% of the population has a bachelor's degree, whereas the Indian diaspora within UK and US, it's 81%.
Wow.
All right. So these founders are significantly more educated. The second was job quality and job prosperity. So highest taxpayers in both UK and US are Indian diaspora. And then in terms of job quality, I mean, your Google CEO, Microsoft CEO, YouTube, Perplexity, Loom, Zscaler, Adobe, Micron, FedEx, Procter & Gamble. I can go on for days. Right? All of these guys are Indian. And third, and the biggest one of them all, was even though we only represent 2.1% of the population, we've resulted in 19% of all unicorns. So it's almost a 10x output of population per parity in these two geographies. And so that was the why, the Indian diaspora side, right? And then the second aspect was that, let's say you want to invest in my fund, right? You're an LP. You'll ask me two questions. The first would be why this thesis works. So that was a tick, right? These founders, unfair advantage, good. The second question you would ask is why you, right? And well, why are you building this? Why can't a Tom, Dick, and Harry do this? And that was the cultural understanding, as well as the ecosystem that I'd built out, being part of stuff like Indiaspora and Thai and Tech India Advocates and India Tech Week and all of these sort of, and Hindu Economic Forums and so on and so forth. I had gotten to know these founders even before they really became founders, right? Even when they were ideating early stage, they would come ask me questions, they would see me at events, and I'd built that relationship. So you would find, the Tom, Dicks, and Harry investing in these guys at 100 million, whereas I'd be in them at 10 million. So that became the resonant way. And then part of that was also, I understand these guys work super hard. I have that affinity towards it. They're still massively underfunded. I mean, women from Asian background, right? If you look at, a statistic in UK and US, get 1.3% of all venture funding. Right?
Yeah, it's really bad.
It's really bad, right? So, and I wanted to champion that. So, and a culmination of all these things led me to start Aryan Ventures.
Yeah, I mean, I can speak to the funding problem with women.
Yeah.
So I had a startup in Carnegie Mellon called
Nice.
Self-Best, and I was funded by Carnegie Mellon, and we had an office space there, so that went well. But in general, I have been going through the statistics, and they're alarming.
Yeah.
As to why that's the case.
Yeah.
So we help founders raise 9 figures collectively, but most of the founders treat pitching as a tech problem, pitching problem. But what do you think is the first conversation breaker that doesn't get them funded, as per you? What is the biggest challenge?
I would say it is I would say, one is when they reach out cold versus one in person. I'll give you both. The in-person one is you really need to have clarity on what you're explaining, right? If you were to run into me at a networking event, many founders don't really know how to pitch. Right. I mean, I've seen this here in some of the institutions here. They'll come up to you and they say, so I'm building a robot company and I'm trying to do, one, they're not looking at you. Second, they didn't even ask you, hey, how are you doing? What do you do? May I know about you? I like you. But, right. And they just go straight in, and that immediately will turn me off. Right. Even if you're doing something great. Right. So that's the first thing. It's building that. I think for me, everything starts with relationship, the persona, how someone is perceived, how someone comes to me, what they're saying. Again, because I'm betting on the founders more than anything else. That's what venture is. If you want hardcore business analytics, growth, and understanding and investing on fundamentals, PE and hedge fund is the answer for you. A venture is people driven, right? So that's what I would say. And then in the second one, the cold outreaches, and where often a lot of people fail is, again, they would send a massive blurb, right, where I think it should be very clearly bullet pointed. And then the second thing is, again, they haven't done enough due diligence themselves, right? I get pitched left, right, center, on all types of deals. But, if you go to my LinkedIn, there's very clearly set out what I invest in, at what stage, how much I put in, as well as the name of all of my portfolio companies. So a smart founder can very easily understand, okay, well, if he or she is building in the fintech space, and I've built, invested in multiple fintech companies, he or she can go, hey, Anmol, I've seen you've built in the fintech space. I've seen this company's been doing this. We're trying to build this bridge with this. And just like a 3-4 sentence, that's it, right? Where it shows that he or she's taken that active initiative, what they're trying to do, and there's clarity. I'm not having to open a message and open up a massive paragraph of jargon, which I, seriously
Yes.
at 1 or 2 a.m. because I'm a night owl, read that. And then also like he understands that I am investing in these kind of products. He's not saying like, sir, I have a plumbing business, can you give me a 2 CR check? I don't understand this business.
Yeah.
So I think these two are the biggest disconnects. And then after that, I think it really depends on the structure of the team you've built in. I think, so this is the initial step, right? I think after that, where things fall apart is having the right traction. Mm-hmm. And traction, people are like, well, I'm a pre-seed company. I'm not going to have traction. But traction is not just monetary. Mm-hmm. Traction is also what have you done in terms of putting the team together. Mm-hmm. And a massive takeaway for a lot of these teams is to get guys who are advisors in a lot of top C-suite teams, whether it's the Fab Five, the likes of Google, Microsoft, all these companies. Get some of those guys on board, on in terms of what you're doing. Build that network. So when an investor is looking at your deck, they can see, okay, well, if these top guys, if these managing directors, partners, VP level guys are believing in you, there must be something right. So that's, I would say, a few things where I would say that 95% of them fall out, and then the 5% who do good, after that, it becomes a much more smoother sailing.
No, absolutely. And I mean, you are supporting 80 plus startups, over 5 funds. I'm sure some of them didn't work.
Of course.
So tell me about a build that revealed the gap between a technology working versus a business working.
Oh, that's a great question. And yes, I would love to say all of them work, but no, we have some really bad stories. But I would say where the technology worked and people didn't work.
Business didn't work.
And business didn't work. Okay, mm-hmm. I would say it would the business, but I would say business is run by people. So I would go back to the people side of it, where the people didn't work. I don't want to name the company or whatever, but essentially layman's statement of like what happened was, and I'm always very unsure nowadays if I want to back couples as founders, mm-hmm. right? So essentially the long story short was there was a couple as 2 founders, and their CTO was actually the wife's brother, which wasn't told to me. So essentially a family building, which again, sometimes it works. That's why it seems sometimes controversial. I'm always like, should I do the next one? Should I not? Because in some cases it has worked. Mm-hmm. And, initially the founder seemed super, super hardworking. He would take late meetings. He was, based in West Coast, and I was at that time in UK. And then as soon as we'd invested, he was like, oh, by the way, my wife's pregnant. She's going into labor. So again, you can't fault the founder for that, but all of a sudden, your co-founder is going to disappear for a year. So, your manpower has dropped off 50%. And then, I was like, okay, I mean, you should have told me this before, but what can you do? And then all of a sudden he stops replying for a couple of weeks. Yeah. So I'm chasing him like, hey, what's going on? Because me and a few other guys had invested in him. We're like, hey, what's going on? And a couple of weeks later, he sends me this photo sitting on the beach. It was him, his wife, and the so-called CTO, but actually his wife's brother, which I found out was then her brother. And it was like, we needed time off to recharge and recuperate. And I was like, you're taking my investor money to go on a bloody holiday to recharge. That's not happening.
I think that comes down to integrity.
Yeah. Which
and have you started devising ways on how you can figure that out beforehand, or is that still a black box for you?
I would.
This is out of the script.
This is out of the script, right? Exactly. Yeah. See, the thing is, I would love to say there is a tool, but there really isn't. Even the best of AI can't figure out if there's integrity. How do you really picture, structure, integrity?
I honestly feel humans can still have a better chance at figuring that out than AI.
Because we have an instinct, right? That gut instinct, that sixth sense. AI doesn't have that. Maybe, later. Elon Musk might build something going the way he is with Neuralink. But jokes apart, like it's a very hard way. That's why we try and preface the relationship where we come into these guys early and we help them so that relationship is built, so they see us less as just investors who they can't talk to, but more as business partners, right? Because what often happens is, and I'm not saying that he might not have going through something, is when founders do go through stuff, and being a founder is really difficult, right?
Yes.
I've gone through that journey multiple times. It's super lonely, late hours, things don't work for years and years and years until they all of a sudden do. So before that exponential curve hits, it's super lonely. And the last thing you want to tell your investor is like, dude, I'm really struggling, right? Because the investor starts to get worried. So there definitely is that aspect of it, and a lot of founders hide it. But I think, again, like you said, it goes back to integrity of, can they be open and honest? Can we work through something? And if my founders are going through some stuff like that, I would love for them to be able to speak to me. And I hope that in the initial ways, the way I've approached them, that it has been open and honest. And luckily, I have my founders messaging me at 9, 10 p.m., 1 a.m., right? I just say, don't bloody call me at 1 a.m. for no reason. Otherwise I'm not going to say that on a podcast, but, but I am available. Like, they all have my number. This is the same policy, in my company, throughout the funds, throughout the partnering family office, my family office, all the other ventures. We have about 300 employees, from analysts to interns to senior partners to board members to LPs to whatever. And they all have my number. Every single one of them.
I think it comes down to having a flat structure. You know, we talk about flat structures within the organization, and I think what you're sort of creating and exemplifying is having a flat structure even with your investment partner, and because they consider themselves as part of the company from day one. So I think it's sort of the way you invest in the company, sort of going in hands-on, being there, sleeping on the couch with them, brainstorming ideas. It comes back to that ultimately, because you're considering yourself, investing yourself as a part of that company. So your portfolio companies are making over 300 million ARR. Walk us through that inflection point that separates a company that actually scales and the ones that plateau. So now we're not talking about failures. We're talking about the plateaus.
So it's beautiful, actually. That we call the 1 to 3 million the swamp. I think getting to that 0 to 1 and the 1 to 10, right? So 0 to 1 is you get your MVP, you get your first customer, you get validation. You're trying to, at that point, just show that what you are building is needed by the market. Then you go your 1 to 10, which is that the market is adopting it, and what you're really fixing is for price and the market conditions and that sort of stuff. The 3 million to the 50 million, or more so the 100 million journey, then is you're really adapting then the team and replacing yourself. Right? Before you're that 3 million founder, you're very actively involved, right? I remember when I was sub 2-3 million.
More like founder-led to product-led?
You have to be almost more than product-led, would be corporate structure-led, that at one point you need to devise strategies which will really scale your product, but not as a founder-led product, but actually a tool which has figured out its niche in the market, which has figured out its price in the market, which has figured out its positioning in the market, as well as geographic positioning, as well as the future in the market. Where a lot of people fall out in that 1 to 3 million gap is they build what's called a nice to have product versus a must have product, right?
Yeah, like a vitamin and an antibiotic.
Exactly, right? So you need to, one, identify that. And then once you've identified that, or if you've had to pivot, again, a lot of founders will be too rigid, right? So one of the skills the founders need to have is coachable. A lot of founders get to 3 million and they think they know. Yeah, exactly, right? And the business stops because they no longer, want to listen to the investors. And typically at that point, the investors will say, hey, let's bring some other people in.
The learning stops, the feedback loop stops.
Exactly,
so
right?
That's where you stop growing.
Yeah, if you look at, one of the largest conglomerates, which, we are driving towards, is to become like the Adani conglomeration. Adani himself is just the chairman. Then you have Adani Gas, Adani Electrics, Adani Enterprise, Adani Cyber. I'm pretty sure if you ask Mr. Gautam Adani the question of like what this company's portfolio was and what this guy was, he doesn't have a clue. So, that's a very far-fetched example. I'm sure Adani's done more than the 100. He's done like 200. But going from that 10 to 100 then means how are you slowly replacing yourself out of the business and giving power to your CTOs, your CMOs, your head of engineering, and all of these guys to really start to build that infrastructure where you know the product is in demand, where you know the geography is there, where you know the price is there, and you're trying to build out this must-have company's future, and you double down on distribution, you double down on value, and you double down on hiring. I think one of the biggest choke point for a lot of the people is hiring the right people in. And again, that takes a lot of trust and it takes a lot of courage, right? Because when you've been building something for years and years and years, it's your baby. So to say that you'll just give it away to someone and now they will run it, I mean, it happened with me, right? When I made my few hires, before getting my chief of staff in and whatnot, and anytime someone would make a mistake, I'd be like, let me go fix it. And it's so instinctive, right? Until I had to really go, I will have to let them fix it, because otherwise, if I constantly try to fix it, they will never learn. And when I truly do need to step out of it, they will make a bigger mess. So I think those are a few bottlenecks which really restrict these companies at only a 10, and they're not able to go, to a level 100.
Yeah, so I think coachability is core, and it is core at every stage of the company. Massively. As you said. So I think delegation is key as well, because ultimately you have 24 hours, and if you need to go to the next level, you need to go from building the thing to having the big vision for the company. And I think those are very different mindsets.
Massively.
Like when I was just an engineer building stuff to being, product founder to scaling a bigger company, they're very different hats to wear, and it's difficult to sort of context switch between them, because the scope of vision is very different for each of those roles. So I think that needs to change, and yet the person or the founder needs to be coachable in a sense.
See, what a lot of people don't realize, that being a founder versus being a CEO is two different things. And people interchangeably use, I'm a founder and CEO of the company, and I'm like, you're not. Because if you're a founder, your role is very different, versus when you're a CEO, your role is very different. You're almost corporatizing your structure, and I would never tell a startup to corporatize, right? So once a founder understands that by rigor, by hardship, or by luck, they start to do well.
And so you've been looking at the market. So what are the biggest opportunities? Which sector do you think has a lot of potential in terms of ROI that people are missing right now?
See,
this might be a secret sauce, but
it depends on how much you pay me after. See, I think India is an enigma. It's such a breadth of cultures. There's such a huge potential. But I think it massively lacks on governance and execution, which is two things that I would love to see. And as well as maybe I would say long-term thinking as well. So, I mean, India right now, if I was to say what I would invest in right now to get quick money, I mean, it's obviously consumer driven, right? The statistic is over the last, I think, year of venture funding in India, I think 83 billion was raised. And if you look at the first three categories of where most of this money went, the first was F&B, the second was beauty, and then third was fashion. So, if you talk about the opportunity in India, today's day and age is that. But if I was to talk about the bigger picture and what the government wants to do, and, this $20 trillion goal and wanting to chase, US's and China's, this is not going to be achieved by that. India really need to control the infrastructure, as well as the whole, infrastructure of AI itself, to be able to be the world opportunist. So where I would then ideally want to go is in that layer of AI, right? AI sort of has 5 layers to it. The first one is energy. India has some energy, but not the breadth of which we would want. And then the middle of the cake is completely missing, right? The second part is chips. India has no chips, doesn't develop its chips, massively reliant, right? The third is sort of the build part of it, the semiconductors, the manufacturing, the putting it together. We are starting to do it, but again, we're like 10 years behind.
I know. Yeah.
The fourth layer is then, the assembly, distribution, again, starting to do it, but 10 years behind. But the fifth layer, the application layer of AI, I think we're doing very, very well in that, which again, could be a short-term bet. If you ask me like what I would invest to get a quick return, would be that. But I think if you really want to hedge and have that long-term thinking and have faith in the government and really truly see the opportunity, I think this middle infrastructure layer of AI is way more important and way more profitable. Because another thing is the barriers to entry is so high, right? Not everyone can structure semiconductor projects. And it doesn't just have to be plants, right? It could be the picks and shovels of what's needed to set up these plants and set up these manufacturing hubs and set up the facilities that require, to manufacture chips, the trades, the logistics, the refining structures, and so on and so forth.
It's an ecosystem.
It's a massive ecosystem, right? And the issue right now India has is, since it doesn't have that, it can be choked very easily by the likes of China, who pretty much controls all parts of the ecosystem itself.
So with that, we have finished our major part. So we are moving to the rapid fire. So the most overrated technology trend right now?
I would say like these photo editing, marketing apps, the quick editing, AI edit, blah, blah, blah.
One metric that founders pitch that tells you almost nothing.
So in terms of the worst thing that they show is when they do, I would say what they don't show is when they show use of funds and they say for operational or for hires. I hate when there's not a breakdown, operations. What do you mean by operations? Mm-hmm. Hires, who are you hiring? Why are you hiring? I think that's the most useless thing, like show information.
The one question you always ask that reveals everything about a founder.
Oh, great question.
It's a cheat sheet.
This is great stuff, guys. I would say two. Can I say two answers or one? Okay. The first one would be how they ended up finding this company, right? So typically you find that a founder who found a problem to solve from their personal reason and how they came across it and the story behind it, they're much more attached to it rather than just someone saying, oh, I saw something on YouTube and I wanted to find it. That's the first one, the connection to why the something was started. And then the second question I would ask is regarding the industry knowledge, right? So regarding, tell me about the competition. Who's in the market? How big is the market? Who's the biggest player? Revenue? How do you plan to expand? It's a market-related question.
Tech first or market first? Which do you build around?
Market first.
The hardest part of scaling that nobody warns you about?
That is bloody difficult. That it's going to take years and years and years.
The future of tech entrepreneurship in one sentence?
That it is going to be pessimistically optimistic.
Okay. With that, we come to an end for a podcast. Thank you for joining us today. We learned a lot, and I think our audience already got the cheat sheet in order to get themselves into your fund.
Absolutely, and my absolute pleasure being here, and thank you very much for having me. And I hope people got some useful insights.
I'm sure they did.
Yeah.
With that, we have come to an end of our podcast for today. And I talk about co-creation a lot in terms of product creation. But here we learned about co-creation in a very different setup, where a founder and an investor is coming together to co-create bigger things for the world. And I think both the sides have to be also mutually invested, making and ensuring that the company is successful. And we learned so much about that today. So till the next time you're thinking about your next innovative idea or the next time you will fundraise, make sure to like, subscribe, and comment on the channel and share it with your friends and family. See you then.